given the inherent functions of democracy, politicians will be bribed to helping out special interest rate groups, and banks will collude with politicians to get a helping hand. And therefore, we just, under all circumstances, need to regulate banks. The other way is to tell politicians, stay away. Be strictly non-interventionist. Let banks fail. I strongly believe in that, but I can also see that that might not be a credible option. So how do we combine that? And that, I think in the case of Iceland, and I think we can talk about specific liquidity rules, capital rules, but I do think that Iceland fits into Charles Calomiris' description of banking crisis. Charles Calomiris is a Columbia University professor of finance and economics, written extensively of banking crisis. And he thinks about banking crisis as a constitutional problem, as a dysfunctionality in certain democracies that banking and politics becomes too intertwined. And when that happens, investors expect bailouts. And so we might change small rules, but if the constitutional problems remain the same, that there is too close relationship between banking, business, and government, you have a problem. And you don't have to walk around a lot in Reykjavik to see that constitutional problem. Still, when I say constitutional problem, I don't talk about the actual constitution, I talk about it in a broad sense of rules of separating banking and government.
Well, I honestly have to say that I think it was unrealistic of the central bank leading up to the crisis to say we're not going to back up the system. What happened was the rating agencies gave a AAA to Kaupthing and the others. Yeah. The same rating as the Fed had in the US, a AAA. And the central bank had never explicitly said that they would bail out the banks. And if you looked at the numbers, it was totally unrealistic. So I don't think it's a realistic argument today to say, well, they should have said it implicitly. I think you should rather put more blame on the rating agencies that had open access to all shelves in all banks and should have seen the overall picture. What was the problem was there was an overflow of money.
Yeah, but do you remember the reaction from the Icelandic central bank, from the Icelandic government, once Fitch pointed to one of these problems in March of 2006? That showed very much the collusion between the banking sector and government.
That's another discussion, yes.
That once a rating agencies actually pointed to a problem, there was one unanimous voice.
Well,
government, central bank, financial authorities, political parties, and I think that we had a long discussion in Iceland about a democracy following that. Initially, I thought it was a little bit silly discussion, but I do think that it illustrated some inherent problems in Icelandic democracy. And
I think also there was a market failure at that time. Maybe Iceland at that time was the canary bird in the mine that people were noticing that was out of breath. But we came out of that. We called it the mini crisis in 2006. What I'd like to go back to is the discussion on monetary policy and the examples we have ahead in front of us today all around Europe. And I think Lars mentioned it quite cleverly that there is no such thing as the perfect monetary policy. There are different ways to go about it, and we have to accept that we won't find the perfect solution. There will always be issues to deal with, and you never solve it once and for all. But what we can do at the moment is to take a look around Europe and see the examples that we have. What does it really mean to be a part of a common monetary policy? If things go bad, as is the case with many Southern European countries, as is the case with Greece, is it viable what Greece is doing now? Saying, well, we won't bail out of the euro, but still we want a bailout. And what examples will that give to the other troubled countries of Europe? Is the common monetary policy of Europe really going to last. So there are huge threats to the system that was created, and some have meant it is the perfect solution for Iceland. And we also see in other countries that maybe it's not at the end of the day only about the monetary policy. I think the inflation in the 70s and 80s that Lars mentioned, it was not a failure of the monetary policy exclusively. There were other problems in the economy that created that inflation.
If we move a little bit into, because we only have a short time left.
I think Milton Friedman, not short after that experience of high inflation, visited this country and repeated his dictum, inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon. And I think he was right. Anyway.
Well, if there is a question from the